Welcome back. Welcome back to my show on emotional healing for Christian women. Men are also welcome. I'm your host, Marvel Adeyemi. This is a new series that is inspired by my upcoming book, and it's designed to help you understand trauma, particularly childhood trauma, and mostly how to heal from it. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that my book, Beyond the Hurt, is almost here. Yay! I can't wait to share it with you. This book is a powerful guide on healing from childhood trauma and stepping into flourishing. Also, make sure to download my free reflective journal from my website. It's a free resource. It helps you capture and process your spiritual and emotional healing journey. Today, we're going to start with understanding how trauma impacts the mind and body. But before we dive in, I want to share a beautiful quote from Rumi that captures the essence of what this journey is all about. The quote is, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This is an invitation to everyone listening to acknowledge your pain, to embrace it with compassion, and to see it as the starting point of healing and growth. What is trauma? Why does it matter? Trauma can be confusing and daunting. For many of us, it's something we associate with severe events like accidents or war. But trauma, especially the kind that is rooted in childhood and family dynamics, is much broader and it's more complex. It's often called complex post-traumatic stress disorder or CPTSD, or like the sudden shock of a traumatic event. CPTSD stems from prolonged, repeated exposure to abuse, to neglect, to unstable environments, especially during your formative years. Recognizing and processing trauma is like learning a new language, one that helps us decode the message that our bodies and minds have been trying to communicate for years. It's about developing the awareness that unravels how your past has shaped your emotional world, your relationships, your beliefs, and your sense of self. Now, let's think about it this way. Imagine two children growing up in the same household where there was emotional neglect. Normally, one child internalizes the pain by becoming withdrawn and anxious, afraid to be seen. The other one lashes out, acting as if they're in control, when deep down they feel everything. But the same environment, but two vastly different responses. And this is where it gets interesting. Both reactions are natural. They are survival strategies the children developed to protect themselves from pain. Trauma doesn't always wear a label. Sometimes it's hidden beneath the layers of the behavior, the coping mechanisms, and the beliefs, the worldview. So let's take a moment to unpack some of the most common types of trauma that we know. The first is physical abuse, the kind of trauma that leaves wounds beyond the body. It imprints fear, distrust, deep emotional scars. A child growing up in a household that was raised with voices that signal danger where physical harm is normal, develops hypervigilance, low self-worth, and even chronic physical body pain. The second is emotional abuse. Emotional wounds often cut deeper than physical ones. Words that diminish, belittle, manipulate, it just shapes a person's inner voice for a lifetime. So as Christians, we're encouraged to speak words of life and encouragement. But when we are surrounded by constant criticism or manipulation, it's so easy to internalize those harmful words. The other one is sexual abuse. It shatters one's sense of safety and dignity. Whether it happened in childhood or adulthood, it leaves lasting impacts on one's self-worth, identity, and the ability to form healthy relationships. For Christians, it can also create spiritual wounds, questions about God's protection, and why did such evil even happen in the first place. Another kind of abuse is neglect. It's not just the absence of care, it's the absence of being truly seen and valued. Emotional neglect, in particular, teaches a child that feelings do not need to matter. This can create adults who are emotionally disconnected or overly dependent on the validation of others. Witnessing violence is another one. You don't have to be the direct victim to be traumatized. When you witness the violence, whether in the home or community, or even through media. It teaches distorted lessons about power, about control, and about safety. As Christians, I view trauma through a lens of grace. God sees every hurt, every tear, and He longs to bring healing. But that healing begins when we acknowledge what we've experienced and we are willing to confront it. Trauma's impact on the body and the mind. Trauma isn't just a memory. It lives in the body. It shows up as tension, stomach issues, headaches, migraine, fatigue, and even autoimmune conditions. That's because trauma activates our nervous systems, puts us into constant state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Our brains, particularly the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the frontal cortex, they are the ones majorly affected. The amygdala becomes hyperreactive, causing heightened anxiety, and the other parts help to process memories and become impaired, leading to fragmented, distorted recollections of the past. And the prefrontal cortex, which governs rational thinking and emotional regulation, begins to struggle to function when we are stuck in survival mode. But here is the good news. Healing is possible, and it begins with the awareness. The Bible reminds us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. It's also about breaking old patterns and creating new ones that are rooted in grace, in love, and truth. So how do we begin to heal? It starts by recognizing how our past is speaking through our present, whether through our bodies, our thoughts, our relationships. And this is what this podcast series will walk you through in that journey. So in the next episode, we'll dive deeper into the many masks that trauma wears. We'll explore how it manifests in different aspects of one's life and how you can start to reclaim your true self. Until then, I encourage you to take a moment and reflect on your own story. What patterns or behaviors have you carried from your past? And most importantly, which ones are you willing to bring into the light of healing? Also, make sure to download my free reflective journal from my website that will help you capture and process your spiritual and emotional healing journey. I'll leave the link in my show notes and description if you're watching from YouTube. So thank you so much for joining me today. And if this episode blesses you and the further episodes to come, share it with another sister who needs encouragement. May God's grace continue to surround you as you take steps towards healing and wholeness. Bye for now.